In the hands-on session, we'll be on formatters and linters. Okay, so they overlap with each other, and some of them belong to more than one category. But roughly the three categories of formatters and linters are, first of all, syntax linters, right? When you're using wrong syntax, right? In other words, when your code will not run. And one of them is the linter in PyCharm. And that's actually, again, it's important to recognize, right? That's a commercial linter that's built into PyCharm. And at least as far as I know, is not available outside, right? That's what the engineers at JetBrains basically, doing to make people prefer PyCharm. So it has very extensive configuration options. It's a proprietary linter. It's not part of, it's not on mypy. It's part of the editor. But if you don't want to use it in PyCharm, or if you're using something like VS Code or another environment, you can use mypy, which is probably of all other linters most similar. And mypy will also catch a lot of errors. And if you are using mypy with PyCharm, then you can make there's basically add-in you install into PyCharm. It will underline your mypy comments. In this case, however, I would recommend disabling everything that mypy takes care of, because sometimes you just don't know exactly like which tool came up with it, and it's hard to, you don't know when it complains about something. You have to know which tool complained, so you can look in documentation and see exactly what's wrong. So when you put mypy, it's better to disable the corresponding native PyCharm feature. So when you go to PyCharm settings, there are very, very highly configurable. There's basically go to settings, inspections. Anastasia, can everybody see my screen?
Well, I do.
Okay, great, right. And are there any questions, by the way, so far? Now that
we are managing them.
Great. Okay, perfect. Right. So as you can see, there are inspections here, right? And these inspections, there are a lot of them, right? And determined statements. So you can see that there are literally like multiple hundreds of various inspections. It's a good thing, and it's also a bad thing, right? Because the more configurable something is, the more two people could configure it differently, and someone, basically you may get someone's code, and PyCharm will complain for you, but not for them because they disabled it. Your organization can provide a configuration file. So I mentioned in the first day, right, that PyCharm does not really require a project file the way that Visual Studio does, right? You just open the folder and you can work. But you do actually have the ability, for example, to save the settings and share them on Git with your team. So again, so if you start customizing this, I recommend to share it, because otherwise somebody will keep fixing your code or changing your code, because some inspection that you disabled is enabled for them, and it's very, especially for those who want every comment to be in the right place. Python is the right language for them because it's so strict. It's very annoying to see an underlined statement, so they will fix it for you. So basically, better to share, right? Okay, and the PyCharm here will cache some inspections. So in a moment, I'll show exactly what it caches, what it doesn't, but I will do it when we're doing with tests. Okay, so then the other tool that I wanted to show is pylint, right? So pylint is a bit different tool. So mypy and PyCharm built-in linter, they focus primarily on syntax errors. In other words, they focus on errors that will prevent the code from running. Whereas pylint, just like its grandfather, the original lint for C and C++, it will give you advice. Now, it will give you so much advice that even the creators of pylint, they turn off some of this advice and hit the snooze button on it. Pylint has a command that produces a default pylint configuration file. So I'll show it in a moment. What you do is that there is the file is called pylint.rc. And on Git, one second, so I just open the Git tool as well. Right, so let's see, look within log. Right, so this is the log, and there is somewhere a comment here about pylint. Let me find it. Yeah, so this is, as you can see here, this is the commit in which I added pylint.rc, which is generated using pylint minus generate.rc file, and I upload here. So pylint will create pylint configuration file for you. And guess what? Even in this file, it already immediately disables some of its own settings, right? So in other words, their own default that they generate disable some of the original default that are without the default file. So clearly, some of this is too much because when they produce the configuration file, they already disabled some. And we disable more, right? And when we disable more, then we start, really being very successful here. But it's a bit of cheating, right? Because essentially the only way that we're getting clean pylint, and I'll show it in a moment, the only way that we're getting clean pylint result is by disabling a lot of the warnings that would normally complain about. In some things it complains about are, well, I would say more of kind of suggestions. Like for example, it says too many public functions in a class. Well, I have a data class. It only has data attributes. Is basically purpose is to map or load data from a database. Next lecture, we'll be talking about object relational mapping, namely SQL Alchemy library, and object document mapping, for which we'll show PyMongo library, right? So object document mapping and object relational mapping is corresponding, basically is for, first is for document databases, and the second one is for SQL relational databases. That's a way to work with the database through classes. And you have classes which are pure data, right? You only have attributes. And pylint will complain about every such class, saying not enough public functions. Well, that's not really a valid complaint if the purpose is just hold data. So some of them have to be turned off, right? So we'll show what happens when you don't. So for example, so we have this pylint, right? So you need to specify the file name. You also can configure it to run it on this whole repository. And we will run it here. Okay, so it looks like pylint ranked our code as 110 of 10, right? But if I disable, and actually I should show one more thing, right? So if I go unsafe class, we go data class, right? It will complain or not complain or mention that there is a to do, right? So that's one thing that I did not disable. So in data class there is a to do, because there is a feature of data class that's in Python 3.10, but not in Python 3.9 that we're using. As I mentioned, we're always staying one version behind the latest release. So I put a to do here, not to forget to enable it, namely the ability to use slots, which Atlas already has, but data class does, as of 3.9 does not, after the upgrade. All right, so now let's see what happens when we go back to Ultra Edit and disable this. One second, I didn't open it yet. 1 second. So I need to open the, and I can do it in PyCharm as well, but so go here and we disable, right? So this is where the, any questions, Anastasia?
Yeah, could you please refer to the one about linters and formatters?
Just goes quickly. Yeah, do install linters and formatters globally or per project with VM and so on. Yeah, so per project, right? So all of the, with the exception of PyCharm built-in linter, which is part of the editor and you configure, but you can also configure it. So basically, everything except the PyCharm built-in linter is a Python package. Generally, Python is great and amazing, right? Because everything about Python is also in Python, right? So all of the linters, all of the tools, all of them are packages from the Python package index. You simply install them as VF. And if I look at it, that's an excellent question, actually. I'm glad you asked it. So 1 second. So let me, actually, what? Maybe I should just do everything on PyCharm so I don't have to keep switching. Right. So this is the requirements file. And the requirements file, as you can see here, there is a pylint. So that's pylint. This is the black, right, which is the formatter that we'll talk about soon. So the requirements file has everything, and there per project, when you have a virtual environment, you install it there, and they're local. Okay, now the linter that's built into PyCharm is a little different. It goes by the PyCharm configuration file, so it's also local to the project. It's really not a good idea to make it global because projects differ. but you configure it through a file which is PyCharm configuration file in the root folder. So excellent question. Thank you for asking it. Anastasia, any other questions I should look at?
Now we have figured out things.
Okay, great, right. Okay, so now pylint RC, right? So let's look at pylint RC. Okay, so it looks like that did not like it, wrong encoding. Okay, so why the hell that happened? Anyway, I'll use alterated, so it looks like for some reason it's not ASCII here. 1 second. It doesn't seem to really present any problem here. ANSI, I see. Okay, so I saved it as ANSI late Latin, right? So I probably should have saved it as UTF. Yeah, so it doesn't matter, right? So just to comment, right? So PyCharm doesn't like to open it because it's not UTF. Let me just see if we can convert it to UTF, so we don't have to keep switching between editors. Oh, sorry. To ask it to Unicode. Okay, let's see if it makes PyCharm feel any better. It makes PyCharm feel much better. So let me just connect it to Git and we'll continue. Right. So any questions so far, by the way? Okay, so I'm going to write a commit message saying switched encoding to UTF-8. Okay. No questions so far?
No.
Okay. All right, continue. All right, so what we're going to do here is to, you see this says disable, right? So, well, too few public methods, that's the one, right? So I'm going to just remove everything disabled and let's see how well we do here, right? So that's a real test, right? Oh, sorry, terminal. Okay, well, a lot of things it doesn't like. Okay, so what doesn't it like? Oh boy, it looks like now, okay, so PyCharm likes UTF-8, but not the, okay, so I'm just switch it back. Pylint doesn't like UTF-8. PyCharm doesn't like Latin. Well, we want to use the code we want to use the code, right? Not look at it primarily. So let me switch back. See if it's any better. Wonderful. Okay, so that's our to do. We've seen it before, right? Missing module docstring. Okay, well, that's one thing that it complains about here. So in module, right? So we have docstring for classes, we have docstring for metas. They like docstring for module in init. Okay, so maybe it's valid, but sometimes it's just you don't want to put the, you have a lot of init files that are simply empty and indicate there is Python code in the folder. Sometimes it's not really necessary or useful to just go and put all of them. So that's why it's typically disabled, right? So let's look at another class, let's say unsafe class, right? So what to come out here? Too few public methods, right? That's the one, right? So, well, too few public methods, it thinks in its great wisdom that there should be 2 public methods, but there is 0. Okay, well, my bad, right? Not enough public methods. So anyway, so pylint is amazing, right? You just have to make sure that you configure it so it complains about things that you care about. I will show in a moment that pylint can complain and find things which are actually quite difficult to find. And I'll do that when we go to testing. But so far, let me just finish with pylint. Any questions so far before I go to formatters?
No, I think we can proceed.
Okay, great, right. So, and by the way, just before we continue, as you may remember, we're talking about Git, right? So one good practice is never leave anything uncommitted on Git. So I'm just going to make a commit saying back to Latin encoding. Right. Okay, great, right? So now back to Latin encoding. Git is clear, so we can always recover and come back where we were before. Okay, now what is black? Right, so black black is not the only available formatter, right? So that's a different category of formatters, and black is opinionated non-configurable formatter. It's not that opinionated, frankly. I mean, it's I would say a lot of things that seems to live the way they are. So when I was reading documentation, I thought that this is something that will format the code, every single line will be changed. No, actually some things that when it sees, it leaves them as they are. But one good thing about black is that it's by design non-configurable, because when you start configuring formatter, everybody configures them differently. And in open source project or in commercial project, when multiple developers configure the formatters differently, that's very dangerous, because you start getting a lot of diffs just because you formatted one engineer would run a formatter with one set of settings, and all of the code will change. So then another engineer will make a few changes and then run the formatter again, and all of the code will change back. So instead of getting your revision history in Git based on the formatters that you, configurable or almost unconfigurable, there are a few things you can configure. And it's great, right? There are also other choices, autopipate and yapf. Anastasia, do you see me okay? I'm going to make sure my internet is all right.
There was a lag for a couple of seconds, so probably repeat the very last sentence one more time.
Okay, yeah. So black is the choice that I believe is good, because is by design has limited configuration options and is less likely to produce back and forth changes because different styles that you get with the highly configurable formatter that two engineers on the project configure differently, or multiple engineers. But other options are also autopipate and yapf. Again, so I'm using black because that's what I'm used to, but you can look into others as well. So let's run it and see what happens here. Okay, so going back to PyCharm, right? So you go black dot, right? And let's see if it complains about the existing code. It doesn't. Why? Because I ran it before, right? So, but let's make some changes here. Like for example, let's I don't know, make a few lines here, a few lines there. Perhaps we can leave the space here, and let's see if it we save it, right? And then we run black again. Okay, so one file reformatted, 14 files left unchanged. Back here, so you see it recovered what we had before. And by the way, as you see, the underlines, wiggly lines that PyCharm uses to indicate us to us that it is unhappy now disappeared, and PyCharm is happy again. So black and PyCharm linter have agreed that this is the proper format of PEP8 as it should be. So that's the black formatter, and normally you have them on the bot, right? So normally when you have something automated, you just have a bot make the commit. It's especially bad idea to change the code and then run the formatter that touches any line of code that's not your code, because then you mix the two things, right? So either run it and make sure that only the code that you just wrote or touched is updated, or have commit and then have the bot update your code. But then you have two commits instead of one, so it's not ideal. By the way, black is extremely reliable, because black compiles your code into the bytecode and then changes it and compiles again. And unless the bytecode matches, it does not change the formatting. So it is guaranteed not to destroy or change the behavior of the code.